bonjour à tous, bonjour Probir,
Bonjour,
merci d'être
bonjour.
là. Nous allons parler d'eau et de bonheur, parce que l'eau est un élément primordial du bonheur sociétal, et nous allons essayer d'aborder, de vous apporter une expérience qui pourrait être une inspiration pour voir comment, au fil du temps, les générations passées ont bâti un mode de gestion de cette ressource fondamentale qu'est l'eau, comment nous sommes arrivés aujourd'hui dans le cadre d'une biorégion, celle de Pondichéry, qui n'est pas une mégapole, mais qui est en phase d'expansion relativement rapide et qui pose des vrais problèmes de contraintes de la gestion de la ressource de l'eau. Et qu'est-ce que nous pouvons bâtir pour les générations futures et à venir? Donc, je rappelle que la résolution de l'ONU du 19 juillet 2011 rappelle que toutes les parties prenantes doivent apporter leur contribution, aussi bien les gouvernants que la société civile, à la gestion à la gestion pas seulement des ressources, mais de la mise en place de différents modes de gouvernance et d'analyse des modes de gouvernance pour améliorer le bonheur sociétal de par le monde. Et vous me parliez d'une autre résolution également.
Oui, merci Yamouna. United Nations has also declared the year 2021 to 2030 as the decade for ecosystem restoration. And the ecosystem restoration and the happiness go hand in hand.
Merci. Alors, en tant qu'Observatoire international du bonheur, notre rôle est d'observer, de voir quelles sont les expériences utiles et de les faire connaître. Nous avons donc choisi de présenter la biorégion de Pondichéry telle qu'elle se présente aujourd'hui dans son contexte de la gestion de l'eau. Et donc, moi, j'aime présenter Probir Banerjee comme un éco-citoyen par excellence. Mais vous avez également des charges d'autres associations. Pouvez-vous nous dire lesquelles?
Oui. I'm the president of Pondichéry Citizens Action Network called PondyCan. We also have another collective called Alliance for Good Governance, which is a collection of NGOs, all based in Pondichéry. And then we have another larger collective, which is All for Water for All, which is all the people interested in working on water in the entire Pondichéry, Villupuram, Auroville, Kadlur bioregion, of which we'll be talking about.
So tell me first what our ancient generations have been doing. How did they manage? Comment ont-ils fait cette gestion de l'eau dans les temps anciens?
See, the southern coast of India has erratic monsoons. It is not like the western coast. And so sometimes you have excessive rains and flooding, and sometimes you have very scarce rain, and which causes droughts. So in their wisdom, the Cholas, which is about 1,200 years ago, had come out with a very unique system. And what they did was, even at that time, the population was not huge. There was not need for so much of food. However, what they did was a beautiful system called the Yeri system of tanks, ponds and channels. So the tanks are the bigger water bodies, and each tank is connected with a whole lot of ponds, and they're all interconnected with channels. So, and at that time obviously there was no electricity, so they had created the whole system on a gravitational way, which means even the last farmer would get his water through these channels. And they had devised in such a way the aqueducts and the siphons and all these intricate engineering features which we don't see even today, in a way that the farmer's land would never get flooded and yet always have abundance of water. So this system that they had created, for example in Pondichéry, they had created 87 tanks and 609 ponds which were all interrelated. And the beauty of it was that they had this concept of sustainability so deep rooted, and they worked on all the aspects: environmental, social and economic, as well as cultural. In terms of environment, of course, when you have these water bodies, it creates biodiversity and so on. In terms of social, they had created a system where the primary stakeholders would manage the water bodies. So it was called Kudi Maramatu, in which the local community used to decide on what is to be done in terms of desilting, planting trees and so on. And they would execute the work. So they were the planners, they were the executors. And in terms of economics, they had a beautiful system of giving on contract the ponds for fish and the trees around the bunds, and these were called the usufructs money. So these usufructs money was used again to take care of the maintenance of these water bodies. So and of course they had cultural events like the river festival, and every pond or water body had a deity, and they would have these events where people would come together, and being the primary stakeholders and so dependent on water, they would maintain it in a beautiful and in an impeccable way.
Donc ça, c'est un système qui a été mis en place dans le millénaire et qui à la fois n'utilisait que l'eau de surface, avec une magnifique gestion, donc aussi bien de l'eau des canaux que des réserves d'eau qu'on appelle ici ponds, etc. Et à la fois ne pas donc aller chercher la ressource de l'eau souterraine qui a été un temps considérée comme la panacée pour le développement et qui finalement montre rapidement ses limites. Donc uniquement l'eau de surface et la collectivité qui à la fois se met ensemble pour que cela soit économiquement viable et en même temps écologiquement viable. Alors qu'est-il advenu au moment de l'arrivée des Français qui avaient leur propre vision du système à Pondichéry, et ensuite quand l'Inde, le gouvernement indien a repris la gestion et la responsabilité, ils sont devenus gardiens du lieu, et maintenant que les citoyens sont devenus aussi gardiens du lieu.
When the French were ruling Pondichéry, they institutionalized this entire system. They called it the syndicate agricole and the caisse commune. The syndicate agricole was for the larger tanks and the caisse commune was for the ponds. And they had the whole system dependent on surface water, because the groundwater was like your fixed deposit. You don't touch that. And of course there was no electricity at that time. So the entire, all the farmers and everything was done based on surface water. And the French institutionalized the system, and they had a yearly planner where the community would plan what is to be done. They had a calendar and they would execute the work. And it went on until the government of Pondichéry was formed. When the government of Pondichéry was formed, first thing was the syndicate, the bigger tanks was given to the public works department, and the ponds were given to the local administration or the municipalities. Now, the change which happened was that the community was taken out of the system and it was given on contracts. So all the water bodies maintenance was given on contract, and the community had no say whatsoever in the maintenance of these ponds. And of course, because they did not have the experience, they did not have the knowledge, in course of time between 63 and the 90s, the entire surface water system was destroyed. All the channels, water bodies were silted up, and the whole system got destroyed. So, and the farmers were then forced to go into groundwater aquifers and drill bore wells and take water from there, because they could not depend anymore on the surface water.
Donc si je comprends bien, à partir du moment de cette transition dans laquelle nous sommes encore, nous sommes dans une phase de transition, il y a toujours des hauts et des bas quand il y a des transitions, le fait qu'on soit passé à une gestion unilatérale a amené à une sorte de catastrophe finalement, et qui a amené à aller chercher maintenant la ressource disponible sous terre.
Ils étaient obligés d'aller.
Obligés parce que ça ne fonctionnait pas autrement. Donc la gestion unilatérale ayant montré ses limites, nous sommes arrivés à la fin des années 90
Oui.
à une situation impossible, puisque en fait on est arrivé aussi à la limite, si j'ai bien compris, de la ressource. On est arrivé à deux limites.
Exactement.
Plus d'eau de surface, et qu'est-il arrivé à l'eau de sous terre?
Because of the water was being drawn so much that there was of course the vacuum created, and being on the coast, there was salt water intrusion, and the entire water aquifer, even up to 8 kilometers, had become saline. and once the water aquifer becomes saline, there is nothing much you can be done. So, but then finally the government of Pondichéry had to seek help because the entire water had become saline, whether for drinking or agriculture. So they wrote to the European Union asking for help. When the European Union experts came, they studied the whole thing and they said that the system that you have, the Yeri system and the Kuri Maramat, this ancient system which was there, was the best that they had ever seen. So they said, we will provide the fund only on condition that the ancient system is revived. So
and they did it.
And Public Works Department from 1999 to 2004 formed the tank associations again, so and all the work was collaborative again, and they were it was planned and discussed, and they had these things called cluster. Each channel had a cluster of tanks and ponds. So they had at a local level, then at a cluster level, and then at a state level. So they had created a whole system of governance, and by 2004 the entire problem was actually resolved. Wow. All this water salinity had gone, and it was like the good old days. So because it worked so well, the government decided to continue the same system. So from 2004 to 2008, they continued with the same system. It was called, the project was called Tank Rehabilitation Project of Pondichéry, TRPP, which was funded by the European Union. So they continued this, and by then the European Union funding was over in 2004, but with the local resources, because of the the revenues from the fish contracts and the trees, they could continue till 2008. Unfortunately, in 2009, the new government came and they decided to scrap the system again, and they went back to the contract system. So there's a tender, and in the tender, whoever gets, and the sad part is that the tenders would be issued just before the monsoons, and so then the monsoons would come, no work would be done, and as you know, because of corruption and so on, without doing any work, the payments were made. So every year, huge amounts of money was being spent without doing any work. As a result, after 2009, the whole thing degraded, and Pondichéry is now back where the water has become saline, and people are suffering.
Alors, avec l'aide de l'Union européenne, on a essayé de faire du neuf avec du vieux. Et ça n'a pas bien fonctionné. Alors vous avez essayé de faire maintenant du neuf avec du neuf, en utilisant le vieux. Depuis 2-3 ans, une expérience assez unique encore, et nouvelle, innovante, de comment la société civile, la responsabilité sociétale et environnementale des entreprises, les associations, les écoles, toujours en coordination, et c'est ça que j'ai trouvé intéressant dans votre démarche, c'est que c'est toujours aussi en coordination avec les instances locales et avec le gouvernement local, dans un dialogue. Et donc, vous avez, des 3 dernières années, mis en place une nouvelle forme de collaboration et de participation qui est innovante et moderne, mais toujours en partant de la base de ce que nos anciens ont fait pour essayer d'intégrer les générations montantes et protéger les générations à venir. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire quelques mots sur ça? Et après, nous finirons peut-être sur les défis actuels.
Actually, this whole process we started was in 2008. In 2008, we became concerned about the water situation, and so we did a lot of brainstorming, and we came out with 2 things. One is that we need to work at a macro level as well as in micro level. So at a macro level, we found out that you cannot look at water bodies in isolation. You have to look at a larger picture. So we came up with this concept of a bioregional planning, which means the defining boundaries of the area that we are working on is the bioregion, which is the watershed area. Because everybody in this area are using the same groundwater aquifers. So that is the concept of the bioregion.
Donc ce n'est pas des frontières qui sont administratives créées par les hommes, mais les frontières qui nous sont dictées par la nature elle-même en fonction de l'écosystème. C'est ça qui est innovant dans
because
votre...
Pondichéry is in pockets, and in between you have the state of Tamil Nadu, Viluppuram district and Kadalur district.
Donc tout le monde ensemble.
Now everybody together. It's a kind of a 40 kilometers radius from Pondichéry, and so on the north you have the Marakanam, then you have Auroville, you have Usteri Lake, you have Bahur, and you have Kadalur. So there are very unique ecosystem in each of these, and they're all interconnected with this water aquifer. So that is how we define the boundary as PVAC, Pondichéry, Vilupuram, Auroville, Cuddalore bioregion.
D'accord. Donc, maintenant que vous avez créé cette biorégion et amené des personnes de, de la société civile de toute cette biorégion au-delà des frontières administratives, vous avez travaillé avec les gouvernements des deux États finalement, aussi bien Pondichéry que Tamil Nadu, et vous avez lancé cette notion d'adoption, d'adoption des cours d'eau. Alors j'ai pu participer à quelques-uns de ces événements et c'est assez magnifique. C'est-à-dire que au lieu que ce soit simplement l'association des usagers, des écoles, donc une des idées c'était une école, un pond. Pond est difficile à traduire en français, en fait c'est une retenue d'eau on va dire, qu'on fait adopter par une école, et à ce moment-là les enfants et l'école deviennent gardiennes de ce lieu, ce qui permet d'installer une sorte de pérennité de la sauvegarde et aussi une prise de conscience, mais vous allez bien au-delà aussi par une intégration de ça dans une conscience de l'écologie, en impliquant également le département de l'éducation qui a créé un curriculum spécial pour cela. Et si je, corrigez-moi si je me trompe, mais également pour pouvoir financer, plutôt que de devoir demander de l'argent, prendre l'argent là où il se trouve prêt à être partagé. C'est-à-dire que la responsabilité sociétale et environnementale des entreprises fait que des entreprises sont contentes, elles aussi, d'adopter un cours d'eau, et qu'elles ont apporté des financements dans ce cadre-là, qui est donc un cadre juridique plutôt moderne, juridique et économique plutôt moderne, mais également chacun y met de sa poche, ainsi que les associations caritatives et autres, tout le monde met au pot, et on ne se pose pas de questions, on avance. Et c'est comme ça que vous avez fait toute une adoption de retenue d'eau par des écoles et mis en place un système d'éducation ou un curriculum spécial. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire un mot là-dessus? On est peut-être trop long, mais ça mérite d'être... On verra.
Actually, there are two components. As we mentioned, it's collaboration for an integrated water resource management. Collaboration is about enrolling all the stakeholders, the government, the civil society, experts, and so on. An integrated approach is that we have to work in various aspects. Unless we take into account all these aspects, it will not be possible to be successful. So for example, you need to have studies and research done, because if you're playing the game, you have to know the rules. So we have to have the studies, and then you have to have consultation meetings, because we are talking about a shared vision and we are talking about collective action. So it has to be a consultation process. We have to look into account if the policies are in place, because if your action is not backed by policies, then you have a problem. You have to have planning, because all the works, who will do what, the roles and responsibilities, then you have to implement, you have to monitor, and you have to also organize events which will bring people together in a joyous way, in an atmosphere of working together, and that is the spirit which binds people together.
And ça marche parce que c'est holistique. Pas de gouvernance sans festivité, sans collaboration, sans participation, et sans aussi réfléchir, faire des études et savoir aussi de quoi on parle.
Exactement.
Donc c'est cette approche holistique que vous avez mise en place et qui a fonctionné pendant 3 ans, et qui continue. Le prochain rendez-vous est dans quelques mois.
So we started the study. We have done an extensive study. It was funded by ADEM, a French agency for energy and environment. And we did a 1.5-year study, had discussions with the politicians, bureaucrats, the civil society, and it was, of course, in the meetings there was a lot of disagreements, but at the end of it, people understood the other person's point of view, and it became, we created this whole bioregional planning to look into what are the strengths, what are the challenges, and what are the things that we have to look forward. So that was the study. We also are working with the government on the policy, whether it's at bioregional level or at Pondichéry level. We are working on a lot of events, because unless people come together. So we had, in 2016, we had done a water festival, and then last year we had another water festival. The idea was that how to enroll people. And in that, what we did was we came out with this concept of Neer Kudam. So there is a water jug which was filled, and it was traveling to all the schools where it was received very ceremoniously, and that each school had adopted a pond. We came out with this concept of one school, one pond, one OSOP, and each school adopting a pond, and this is for two reasons. One, you have a physics lab, you have a chemistry lab, but we don't have an ecological lab. So the pond will become the eco lab. So they learn about water, they learn about biodiversity and so on. And secondly, which is very important, is that in the 21st century you need to develop a whole lot of skills, social skills, literary skills and so on. So this one school, one pond will be an integration of all the subjects: history, geography, math, science, art, culture and so on. Because around this pond, most of the schools did not know that there was a pond very close to their school. So and this pond is existing for so many thousands of years. So they have to learn about that. Then they have to learn about the mathematics and the biology. So they will be planting trees. They will be, putting fish in the ponds. And what we have also done is we have tied up with all the government departments: forest department, fisheries, PWD, LAD, pollution control, and everybody is willing to collaborate, because the beauty is it's the schools are involved, the students are involved. So whatever the students need will be supported by the various departments. And so the one school, one pond will also help the students in understanding what are the local challenges in terms of water, real life challenges, and also to how to find solutions. They will be developing social skills by talking to the community. And
Alors, tout ça est passionnant. Je crois qu'il faudra faire une autre session avec l'UNESCO sur l'éducation et l'exemple de cela, mais notre temps étant un peu court, je voudrais juste recentrer pour donner un ou deux exemples pour montrer le côté concret de ce que vous avez fait. C'est que quand on dit on adopte un pond, souvent il n'y a pas de pond, il n'y a pas de retenue d'eau, il n'y a plus de retenue d'eau. Ça a été recouvert d'ordures, et quand je vous dis des ordures, ça peut être une montagne d'ordures. C'est devenu un lieu où il n'y a plus une goutte d'eau et tout le quartier est inondé. Et avec la mousson récente que nous avons connue, nous avons vu les drames que cela fait, également sanitaires, avec le mélange avec les eaux d'égout, etc., etc. Donc là où vous avez travaillé déjà, les retenues d'eau, ex-retenues d'eau, ont été nettoyées avec de tractopelles et ensuite ont été recréées comme des retenues d'eau. Et à la prochaine mousson, elles ont retrouvé de l'eau, retrouvé des poissons, vous avez replanté des arbres tout autour. Et nous entendons le cri de la vache, des vaches ont pu venir boire à ces étangs. Ça a créé des espaces dans ces zones qui sont devenues urbaines, et c'est là l'enjeu des mégapoles. Dans ces espaces-là, de pouvoir retrouver des lieux où la communauté peut venir vivre et parler, et maintenant, ces endroits-là ne sont plus inondés. Donc cette expérience peut être intéressante pour les mégapoles, et je crois que notre temps de parole étant relativement plus que terminé, nous allons... Voilà,
I'd like to add that when we look at a water body, it is not just a collection of water. We have to look at it in a holistic way, where of course water is the most crucial thing, but because of the trees, it is biodiversity, because when the students are learning about biodiversity, and another very important component is that most of the cities and towns have no recreational space. So the pond becomes a recreation space for the community. Yes. So and that is how the community is willing to participate in this whole effort of one school, one pond, because they are getting a recreational space. And all the ponds, we have rejuvenated a whole lot of ponds. In each of these ponds, which was sometimes filled with garbage and so on, but now the community is very happy, because now they have a beautiful pond and they can go there in mornings and evenings. They celebrate their birthdays and whatever festivals they organize around the pond.
Voilà, donc c'est le bonheur. C'est le bonheur encore. Donc l'eau, le bonheur, et ça pour les mégapoles, cela peut être fondamental. Alors vous qui nous écoutez à Paris, nous vous souhaitons une bonne après-midi et merci de nous avoir écoutés. Merci Probir d'avoir été avec nous.